Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, the folks over at Curiosum have put out their second annual Elixir survey. So this survey is open until November 14th. So as of this recording, that means you have about, from when this recording goes live and is published, you have about 2 days to take the survey, just because we're not exactly sure when it's going to go down. So it's like 3 days, maybe. It doesn't take very long. I took it this morning. And they say when the survey period is over, they will publish the results publicly. And I have a link to where they're going to share it too. It's at elixir-hub.com surveys. But yeah, so I went through and took the survey and is asking a lot of questions really about the community, what languages you used previous to Elixir, what benefits you see from Elixir, how happy you are with some of those. Like an example was, what features of Elixir brought you to it, and you can choose all the ones that apply, like concurrency or performance or the syntax. And then you can rate, like, how happy are you with how it's going with those different things. So it's cool. It'll be interesting to see how people rank all this stuff. Like, is it living up to what people expected when they came to the Beam?
Yeah. Curiosum has had this survey for a couple of years too, so this is not a brand new thing. They know what they're doing. So I'm curious to see what the results will be.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of demographics in there too, just like what's your role, how long have you been programming, how long have you been programming Elixir, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So get a little pulse of the community, and so yeah, if you have some time, just go hop on over there and take it and help weigh in and represent your piece of the community.
Yeah. So at elixir-hub.com, where we're going to have a link to this, they have the previous results published here too. Now, I don't know if this is true. I want to say this is the first year that they're actually, published on the site. Like Elixir Hub is a somewhat new, site, but they've had the surveys before the site, existed. And so I guess I'm assuming here, if I'm understanding this correctly, that they've went back to the older results and they republished them, on this website. So you can pretty quickly compare, what the results are throughout the years. Very nice site, by the way. They've got a lot of stuff on there. If you haven't heard of elixir-hub.com, elixir-hub.com, of course, they have a newsletter. They've got an index of companies, of books and podcasts, and then surveys is what we're talking about today. Yep. And then links to a bunch of other communities where you can find other Elixir folks. And then coming soon on their site, as they've marked here in their sidebars, blogs, tutorials, and packages.
Yeah, so I will add that the last year's survey had about 500 people who participated. And as of right now, we're recording this on November 4th. There have been 546 people who have already taken the survey. Yeah. So it's already up from there. So yeah, and then we got got about 10 days from right now when I'm looking at this page to when it'll be closed. So yeah, it's already looking good.
All right, moving on. Rec LLM 1.0 was released. We all know what Rec is. That's the best HTTP request library out there, Rec for request. And then LLM 1.0. So this is a library by Mike Hostetler. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. We've got a couple of links to what is being announced. We've got an X post, and Mike also seems to run a couple of other things, agentjito.xyz. So there's a big summarized blog post of what's going on here. We'll also summarize a little bit here on the podcast, and then finally a GitHub link to the library. This 1.0 release went through 8 RCs. I can feel it. I feel it. I feel the process there of 8 times that you're like, oh, I'm almost there. So the update to 1.0 includes a lot of stuff. Here's some of the notable additions: is that it now includes a Google Vertex AI provider, the AWS Bedrock inference profile models, provider-based URL overrides, context tools persistence, and schema map subtypes list support, things like that. If you don't know what Rec, LLM is really about, this is an Elixir library for working with those LLM APIs in a more sane way. All of them have slightly different API needs. And if you wanted to switch out between some of these different providers, you might have to do something a little bit different in your request, right? And I want to say that even with the same model, but between different providers. So it's frustrating sometimes. And so that's what Rec LLM is trying to smooth over for you. And so as part of like this release, they've got a long blog post that goes through it. So one of the things that they talk about is that they had to use Finch underneath the covers, which is not a new thing. Rec uses Finch as well. But one of the reasons why they had to is because a lot of these LLM providers, API providers, they stream the responses back to you, chunks of text at a time, right? That connection stays open, and it can take, I don't know, a couple seconds for that stuff to come back.
Even minutes.
Yeah, minutes. So it needed to do that. That's probably a low-level thing. So if you want to learn more about that, you can read more about the blog post. But then, guaranteeing cross-provider consistency, that's the thing that might be surprising to you, may not. AWS can provide you, Anthropic models. So you might be used to just using Claude, right? They're using their own servers, or who knows what they're using, but they're using their own servers. But AWS also hosts those, and then Google probably also hosts those. And so depending on your, poison pill you've taken, you want to go use those providers, right? So AWS, it's just billing efficiency, right? We already give AWS $1 million a year. Might as well give them $1.1 million or $2 million for your LLM requests, right? All in one lucky one bill. The other part here is it's hard to really see what the differences are between some of these, because there are subtle differences. All right. Claude Code, for example, has certain limitations on what you can use, the context window, all that kind of stuff. But then when you use AWS's version or Zed's version or somebody else's version, Cursor's version, they have slightly differing parameters. And so one of those common ones that we throw around is context windows. So one of them is like 2 million, or the other one might be 200,000 or 10 million, right? And that matters. That matters for our API layers. All right, that's enough about that. So that's Rec LLM, and it's hit 1.0. It's got a lot of hard stuff that they take care of for you in there. If you want to read up more about that, the blog post will give you a lot more details.
This episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io, the only security platform with true Elixir support. I sat down with founder Michael Lubis to ask this week's security question. Is the security community doing a good job of educating developers?
No, not at all. I go to security conferences and I go to developer conferences, and the set of people at each is just completely different. A lot of security content is written for security people. And it's very weird too, because you'll be reading something and it'll say, oh, to prevent this security vulnerability, do this. But you can tell that the person that wrote this has no idea how modern software or web applications is developed. And I think it turns a lot of developers off of security writing, because they can tell that the person writing it just has no connection. They've never even coded a basic web application, deployed it. And I've seen that at previous pen testing jobs. So that's something with Paraxial.io. I publish a lot of security content, and I really, really want to keep the developer as the audience when I'm writing it, because you don't always see that with a lot of security guidance and information out there online.
Reach out to Michael at Paraxial.io to get personalized security feedback for your projects and your business. That's at Paraxial.io. And next up, Isaac Yanamoto shared how he used an LLM to build an MCP, so got a bunch of acronyms here, to analyze and service your Elixir code base. So an LLM, right? He's using some AI service to build an MCP, which is the Model Context Protocol, which is the thing that can hook into your editor. So your editor can now have access to this tool, so it can get some special tool availability that might be useful to you. And so he says this MCP server is all about understanding Elixir code. So this project is called Codicil. And Codicil is described reading from the GitHub. Codicil is an Elixir library that provides AI coding assistance with deep semantic understanding of your code base. Ask questions in natural language, find functions by behavior, trace dependencies, and understanding code relationships all through the Model Context Protocol, or MCP. He gives a little scenario like, okay, I need to put this together in my head. It's like, what does this do? So he says, imagine you're asking your AI coding assistant, find functions that validate user input, right? You're saying, I'm looking for a behavior, not specific function, right? It doesn't have to be a function with user in the name, right? It's like, I'm looking for a behavior of a function. Or show me what calls this function. Or what dependencies does this module have? And then Codicil, the role that it plays is it understands your code. It analyzes the Elixir projects during compilation. It extracts functions, modules, and the relationships. It's creating a semantic search, which uses AI to understand what the code does, not just what it's named. And it has the ability to connect to AI assistants, providing tools via the MCP that work with Claude, ChatGPT, and other AI coding tools. So Isaac is asking people to give it a try and see if it improves your coding experience. He notes that he's only really done the development testing with OpenAI as the LLM provider, so he encourages feedback and bug reports. He also mentioned that he will be speaking about this at ExMex as well. So ExMex is the Elixir conference in Texas, and that is actually going on the week of this recording. So by the time you hear this and you're like, oh, I really wanted to see that talk, I'm sorry, you've missed it. What I like about this idea is building an MCP server that intimately understands Elixir. Because up until now, we have the MCPs, which are, I can provide tools to the AI agent. And then we have LSPs, which I understand the Elixir code, but really they don't mix, right? The LSP does not hook into the MCP, right? So the language server is I understand how to render and navigate, and I pull out and find functions and things like that. It's interesting to see that this blending and saying, hey, how helpful is this? So yeah, Isaac Yamamoto, if you don't know him, he was behind Ziggler. So Zig is a separate language. It's very C-like, and Isaac did a lot of the work. I think all of it primarily. He's the primary maintainer of it, of Ziggler, which was getting that full deep integration with Elixir with Zig as talking through NIFs.
Yeah, it's some pretty magical stuff. I'm going to say it as Codicil because that's all I hear is like, see you. See you later, crocodile. After a while, Codicil. One of the ways that Codicil is doing this is with compilation tracers, which is really interesting. And so, for example, the question is, what dependencies does this module have? Well, it's getting that information through the compilation tracers that Elixir provides when it's compiling the files, which is really nice. And another one, is just show me what calls this function. Again, compilation tracers is given that insight. So this is a very helpful thing. Not that Codicil is going to be Sherlocked. That's the word. The old thing where Apple sees a cool thing that somebody else is doing, and so they end up building it into the OS. Let me rephrase that. So I think this might be an important enough thing that something like Tidewave or something like the LSP expert could end up having as part of its thing, right? So, be a little bit more official. But Codicil is a great place, especially for now. And of course, the community can have projects like these. Not everything needs to be official. So it's really cool. But it seems very important to have this kind of insight, for AI coding and assistance. So all that to say is, yeah, you definitely need to check this out because I think that's going to be very helpful. All right, next up, Jose Valima has teased a post on Twitter with an image of Tidewave Web. Speaking of Tidewave, yeah, what's going on with Tidewave Web? All right, well, of course, it's a product that Dashbit is putting out, right? So there's Tidewave, the MCP, but there's also the paid portion here of Tidewave Web, which is more of that web-based coding assistant, right? So you open up this Tidewave interface, and then you chat with an agent. You provided an API key and all to your LLM of choice. And it kind of figures things out for you, right? But it has the advantage of being web-based, and so it can take screenshots of your web application and go from there. That's Tidewave Web in a nutshell. And so this Twitter post has, a screenshot of Tidewave Web and soon trademark. So what do I see that's different here? I see all it's got is an install Tidewave, bit here. And so we know currently that it supports Phoenix and Ruby on Rails and React. And I think just React.
Well, they display it now as React plus Vite.
Yeah. So I think it's React just now, but now it's going to be React plus Vite, which is nice. Oh, you know what? I read that as Vue, but it's Vite. Okay, so maybe it still is just React, but Vite is the runner, the loader, the bundler, that stuff. Okay, so maybe still just React, but Next.js is there, which is still just React, I guess, but plus a bunch of framework stuff. But the probably the biggest part of this is Django, Fast API, and Flask. So the whole Python, ecosystem there. That's probably the big deal of the screenshot. So we'll see. Yeah, that's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. So if you're paying for Tidewave Web and you've got like a monorepo of a bunch of apps and like maybe your main stuff is in Elixir, but you've got a couple of little services in Python for whatever reason, probably because your boss forced you to use some Python to do some LLM stuff because the whole world of LLMs exist only in Python and so forth, with that whole errant thought wave. And so those decisions have been made and you have Django or Fast API. Well, now you've got no excuse. Now you could, I'm joking, but you can literally turn off your brain now and not Python code and just Tidewave code. Just kidding. So Tidewave Web, of course, that seems to be the tease is that, some of the Django ecosystem will be supported coming up, which is really cool, really cool. So very curious to see where that goes and how that lands in the Python community.
Yeah, I think it makes a really great business decision for Dashbit, just going where the demand is. And if there's a lot of developers over here that would really benefit from it and they're willing to pay, poof, you got to do it.
Right, cool. Yeah.
All right. And next up, the library Phoenix Test Playwright got a notable update. So first, I didn't know that library existed. So I thought people should know that Phoenix Test Playwright is there. First, you just got to say, well, what is this library? It is execute Phoenix test cases in an actual browser via Playwright. And you can do this on your CI or locally. So the recent update that was notable was there's 0.9 and 0.9.1. So it's like the 0.9 plus a bump. And the bump was pretty interesting too. So we got a link to the changelog. So in 0.9, they had expanded click support, even drag and drop support, which is really cool if you're wanting to get some of that real interaction use. But the thing that I thought was interesting that the PR for the 0.1 release got a lot of discussion about it. And what it is browser pooling, where you opt into it, but it had significantly reduced memory and higher speed. If you're running it on a CI, that can make a big difference. You're like, it is worth it for us to pay this, to have this extra resource available because it speeds up the whole throughput of our testing and our velocity for our team. The feedback was that it was more stable and it was faster. If people didn't know about Phoenix Test Playwright, it's something good to be aware of, and that this new browser pooling option might be just the thing you need to really make that be productive for you.
Just to draw the bigger picture here too, is it, so if this is Phoenix Test, so if Phoenix Test is not the official Phoenix, testing library built-in stuff. Phoenix Test is another testing library created by Firmon Verlesco that seeks to unify the, I'll call it dead view and live view. They have slightly different test helpers, right? That's what Phoenix Test is trying to cover. And both of those don't do full end-to-end, testing in real browsers. And that is what Phoenix Test Playwright is bringing to the table. So Playwright is a driver for conducting your plays with in the browser. And that's the value it's bringing. And good call out there. It's opt-in right now. And I feel like that's probably wise to have that be the default at some point. But we'll see. It's marked as experimental right now, but I can definitely see the need for pooling browsers there because 100 browsers all popping up, boom, my system is dead.
I'm glad you brought up the Phoenix Test. We haven't talked about Phoenix Test in a long time. And just to reiterate, in case you, dear listener, aren't familiar with it, like David, I think you mentioned, I just want to make sure it was clear in the mind for the listener. The API for doing tests with live view is different from the API of doing tests with the dead view. And Phoenix Test, as a separate non-official package, says those should be the same. I should be able to have one way of talking to a Phoenix live view or a dead view and being able to navigate between the two, going from one to the other and back. And that's what Phoenix Test was trying to do. And then this is adding Playwright to it. And so this is not part of Phoenix Test proper. This is like a community contribution too.
Yep. Definitely. I keep on coming across these things like, no, these need to be official, man. These need to be upstreamed. I'll bang that drum for a while. Yeah. Phoenix Test needs to be merged into Phoenix and Phoenix Live View. All right. Well, no, I think we've said all we can there. So moving on to the last item of the day. So Peter Ulrich, good member of the community, lots of blogging, lots of talking on and sharing of knowledge. He does a lot of good work out there. But he's published a new blog post, and a quite lengthy one too, about how to listen to database changes through the Postgres WAL as in write-ahead log. It's a good long blog post, so you probably want to get get a snack and a water as you as you go through it. So what is it about? Why would you want to read this? Well, here's the problem statement. Let's say that you want to react to changes in your Postgres database, send a real-time notification or track changes in an audit log, something along those lines. So you're probably Googling, like, how do I do that, or whatever. And you learn about Notify, PG Notify, and triggers. And that is a good solution. It can be a good solution. I know Oben does a lot, of this kind of stuff too. It's definitely a database-based, database source triggered way of knowing when stuff happens. And that's a common problem to have. And so PG Notify is definitely going to be up on the search results or LLM recommendations. And so this blog post goes into why that can be good, but it doesn't scale to a bigger solution if you've got a lot of that going on. And that is where his post comes in. You can get, the information you want by following the write-ahead log that Postgres provides. The write-ahead log is typically used or commonly used for replication, right? So it is a file that helps ensure durability for Postgres, and it is also used for ensuring replication as well. And so you can have databases follow each other. You can have, a backup basically, right? And so the backup database is going to be following that write-ahead log to basically replicate, what's going on. So that way it can be a good copy of your primary database. And those capabilities, that technique, that feature of Postgres is also a good way to more efficiently know when stuff is happening in your database so that you can react to it. And so, I don't know, the TLDR here is, there's lots of glazed over details here. You're going to want to definitely read the blog post. It's a good one. This is one you want to read. Even if you don't need it right now, this is one you want to read anyway, so you can just understand a little bit more about how databases work. And when that problem comes up, because it will eventually at some point, maybe 10 years from now, but it will. And then you'll have that faint little memory that says,
there is something that can do this. Yes.
Yeah, there is a thing. And then the LLM will still lead you astray into PG Notify. But this is a good blog post, and the WAL is definitely a way for us to essentially enlist our application as its own replication slot, but we just choose not to really replicate anything but the things that we care about. And we're not replicating in the sense of like the meaning of the word. We're really just following the log part of it, right? The log part of it, so we can react to things that we want to. And so he goes through all of the details of like, well, what are you going to get out of this WAL? You're going to get transactions. You're going to get begins and commits. And what do you do with that? How do you know the thing is actually done? That kind of stuff. But then also goes into the problems of like, to do this well, there's several libraries out there. Supabase is in this business, to do this. So they have a solution, and it's a good solution, by the way, as well. And he goes into more details about it. And in this case, you can only really have one listener, just like in replication, you can only have one database filling that slot. It's a slot for a reason that something can fill. And so you are filling that slot for reading from that log. You can't have many readers of that, replication slot. And so that informs your architecture for how to subscribe to listeners, on here. And okay, that's probably as much as I can TLDR. So you have to get more into it. But as I was reading this, I remembered, Mark, you gave a talk about stuff that Fly did here too, because this goes into a big distributed problem here as well. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, when I was working at Fly, I published a library there. It's on their GitHub. I've got a link to it called Fly RPC. And what that is it was Elixir remote procedure calls, but it was leveraging the WAL. And what that meant was, imagine you have a distributed Elixir application. You've got an application where one of the regions has your primary database, because Postgres is not multi-master, right? It doesn't handle updates to a replicated backup and having those go to the primary. Like it just doesn't do that. So you have a read-only replica locally, and writes have to happen on the primary. So then we'd make an RPC call to actually have the write happen over there. Then we'd get what is the new database WAL index after that write happens on the primary, return that back to where the call was made on the secondary, and then we're just monitoring the WAL to see when is that data replicated locally. So what that does for the secondary is I create a blocking call, right? So it just blocks and says, I'm going to wait until the replication has happened. And that's usually quite fast. It's sub-second. It can be, depending on how far and networks and everything that could happen, it's still very fast. But what that means is you're not waiting longer than you have to wait. And you don't have to worry about saying, I did an insert and now I want to do a refresh. Oh, but that data's not here yet, right? Because that was the problem. Like I'm doing an insert and now I refresh and it looks like it's not there. I lost my edit. Angry user. Sad experience. The whole idea is I'm going to block and wait for the replication to happen by watching the WAL. And once it's there, then I unblock and I can do my normal database updates and displays and everything's perfect. Mm-hmm. But that was just one aspect of how we were using the WAL there. And, he's going into more depth of how the WAL can be used, which I think is awesome. It is an incredible tool, and I think it might be underutilized. Another thing, I think, if you're wanting to do like PubSub, which is kind of what he's talking about with this, I want to listen to database changes and maybe publish them. A background job was finished or something like that. People are going to say, well, I could use Oben, or I could have my own GenStage workers writing PubSub events that something has happened. Yes, that is all true. That is all good. What's nice about the WAL is no matter how the database update happens, it will be replicated. If someone goes in and says, oh, we have to fix this with the SQL update, doing some manual stuff, it'll still be in the WAL. This change having happened. Even if something is subverting the normal application flow, it still gets tracked. And you can read it at scale. So like that's the cool part.
Yeah. That's always been like a battle of mine. It's like, how do you get these callbacks? I'm remembering 10 years younger version of me loving all of these active record on before, after commit, callbacks or something. Yep. And writing it was easy. Maintaining it was horrible. and then forget it if you had other things that were chatting with the database and doing things. If you had some business logic that happens in the after callback, but that didn't happen because of some other error, right? And then I'm now in this weird state where I have to fix my records or something. Yeah, it was very strange. And then like this little nagging thought of like, is my app the source of truth here, or is my database the source of truth? And like, honestly, it's always the database that's the source of truth on this. And so if I'm using the database as the source of truth, like then that really should be where this kind of logic belongs. But then that logic is in the database, and like it's so forgettable that is over there. You always think of the database as just this storage, and that's all it is. It's just rows. But it can have logic in it. I remember 10 years before that, so a 20 years younger version of David, pre-developer David. I was chatting with some Java developers. They were using Java struts, that was the web framework at that point. So I don't remember the database layer they were using, what it was called. But I remember they had a quiz on like what percentage of their application logic was in which language. And of course it was like, okay, it's got to be like 90% Java. That's all we write, right? And they surprised me. They said, no, it's 40% in Java, 60% in stored procedures, which was another way of saying there's a lot of logic in SQL. Which, that was 20 years ago, and I don't know what the best practices are nowadays, but 20 years ago, one company at least that I used to work for thought that the logic belonged in the database, alongside the data to react to things.
I actually worked at a company, it's probably 20 years ago too, I don't know, but it was a C# shop. Yeah. So Microsoft.NET C#. And all of their database access was through stored procedures. Like even a SQL, like what we usually just do is a select. It's like, nope, that has to go through a stored procedure. Yeah. Everything was stored procedures. And like you get into, okay, this is a whole lot harder to test. This is, is my business logic correct? You get into so many weird issues. I did not like it.
Yeah, I can't imagine I'd like it. And 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I can't imagine that the tools were helpful in either side here, right? Like getting an end-to-end test that actually touches the database to go through those stored procedures from application logic. And then also the testing frameworks back then were probably much more, well, it was in Java, so everything's a factory and a bean and an instance of stuff. So it's just like, what I don't even know what I'm writing anymore, like what is even real? Everything's so abstract and instantiated and so object oriented and so tedious to just do a thing. And since then, the world has been introduced to the 5-minute blog with Rails and generating migrations for changing the database structure, and a lot more of that logic shifting into application side, monoliths. And then, since then we've gone back to kind of a microservice kind of I don't know where we are now in the whole pendulum of things. But all that to say is that nowadays we have a lot better tooling around testing end to end. And I'm thinking specifically to Elixir at this point, right? Like the Ecto sandbox is just so good that we actually do hit the database in these cases, even if it is just sandbox to transactions, so it doesn't actually go into the real test database and all. Anyway, what a memory trip there. I feel blessed that we're not back in those days. It's still a bunch of stored procedures, but I go through that mental battle every once in a while. I'm just like, where does this logic belong? Probably belongs in the database here, and that's not evil, but I don't look there very often, so it's very forgettable. I don't know what that bridge is to make it more apparent, on the application side, because that's probably 80% of where I live and debug, right? I forget that stuff could be happening on the database side as well.
Yeah, so if you want to weigh in on some horrible experience with stored procedures being the only way, we can commiserate. You can reach out and maybe we can share your story if you're open to that. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.